Welcome back to Wake Up Carolina on a Tuesday morning. 843-661-0937 is our number. We have a very special and surprising guest this morning. How many times have I told you there are a couple of personalities in the Democrat field that I find very interesting?
You've said it a lot.
I said, Pete Buttigieg and Tulsi Gabbard are the two that I find. And here's why I find them so interesting. I still think they have an opportunity to define themselves. And I think so often political figures with long careers, it's hard for you to define yourself because you've already been defined by ancillary and outside forces. But Tulsi Gabbard, a presidential candidate and a member of Congress representing the 2nd District in the state of Hawaii.
That's correct.
Good morning.
Good morning.
In,
Great
in
to be here with
studio
you.
live. This is great.
It's pretty gutsy for a Democrat to come into the. It's a little like Comey yesterday, or we were talking about Jim Comey goes to Chris Matthews or Chris Wallace's show.
Yeah.
Tulsi, good morning. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. It's good to be here in your studio with you.
Absolutely, and
Thanks for having me.
It's a treat to have you here. I want to say something, and you tell me. It's not a question as much as my commentary.
Sure.
Followed up certainly by yours. I have always felt the mistake some Democrats have made in accepting or not the outcome of Donald Trump is lumping the Trump voter in with the abrasive, narcissistic personality that is the president. You and Mayor Buttigieg have been the two that I think have clearly distinguished what Trump is and what the Trump movement represents. Unravel that from your perspective, if you don't mind.
Look, I think your assessment is accurate in the mistakes that have been made in lumping everyone who voted for Trump into everything that Trump tweets out every day, or the kind of chaos that's been created in his administration. When that's really not the case. It's not the case at all, and this is the problem with. We've seen from some of the other Democratic presidential candidates and others within my party is as they dismiss or treat with incredible disrespect those Trump voters rather than actually having the conversations, going out and talking to folks, listening to what they're saying, asking them, why did you vote for Trump, or why do you support him now? Really getting to the root issue of, it's for some folks it's economic insecurity when it comes right down to it, whether they lost their job because of the NAFTA trade deal or their father, their grandfather did. There are a lot of these deeply rooted problems that really come from a place of concern or fear and insecurity. They feel like they've been left behind by the entire political system. And Trump was this guy who came in who was really going to blow the whole thing up, right? A lot of different people came. There were some who disagreed with him on every other policy, but in the campaign, candidate Trump, he talked a lot about ending regime change wars. He talked a lot about calling out Saudi Arabia for their direct and indirect support of terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and the extreme Wahhabi Salafist ideology. They're spending billions of dollars spreading around the world to create fertile recruiting grounds for these terrorist groups. They were drawn to him and voted for him because of that alone. There's a lot of different reasons. And once you actually start to get to talk to folks, respect them, let them know that, really am interested in hearing what you have to say. It creates them the opportunity to have a real conversation about the issues. And this is where I'm really proud of the campaign that I'm leading, because at this point, even in our primary, we are reaching out to Democrats, Republicans, independents, and libertarians saying, I invite you to join me.
Tulsi, I believe that the Trump voter is a Trump voter. They're not ideologically driven. They're not knee deep in politics. They're people living their lives. They saw an opportunity to, as you said, disrupt the political orbit. When you hear people say the left and the right, those are the dominant, most intense voices in American politics today. Why can't pragmatism carry the day? Why can't moderation? Why can't we reasonably govern the country any longer? Is that something you hope to be a part of moving forward?
It is exactly the movement that I am leading now with our campaign and this really grassroots driven movement that really represents bringing people together, being able to understand that we can agree to disagree. Sometimes we can disagree without being disagreeable, but we stand united based on, the principles and the freedoms that are the foundation of our country, that we start first with where we are coming together. We start with what unites us, and then have practical common sense conversations about how we can actually solve the problems, not pitting one group against the other, the left versus the right, progressives versus conservatives, Democrats versus Republicans. I think the vast majority of the American people who don't represent those extremes are sick and tired of the infighting and hyper-partisanship and bickering that has stood in the way of actually solving problems and getting things done in our government. And so, again, I think there's such a hunger for that common sense leadership that's focused on putting the well-being of the people in this country and our country ahead of everything else. And that's what I'm about.
What do you perceive America's role and responsibility in, and I'm going to use air quotes here, we're on the radio, policing the world? You have a very unique and interesting perspective, a very similar one that I share. But in your own words, what do you think America's role and responsibility is in, once again, policing the world?
Very bluntly and directly, the United States of America should not be the policeman of the world. For so long, in the post 9/11 era, but even predating the attacks on 9/11, our country has gone in, launching regime change wars, toppling dictators in countries that we don't like, but propping up others who for some reason we do like, and then going and beginning these follow-on nation-building missions without really ever understanding that so often these regime change wars, these efforts to go and be the police of the world, actually end up resulting in more death, destruction, and suffering for the people in the countries who were supposedly trying to help. So selling these wars under the guise of humanitarianism, when actually that's not really what happens in the real world. And we see how in Iraq, for example, in Libya, in Syria, in Yemen now, these wars actually undermine our national security, because they result in the strengthening of terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, the creation and the expansion of terrorist groups like ISIS and others. So in reality, if we should be looking at every single question of the use of military force, of sending our men and women into harm's way, is what is our objective? We must have a clear objective. And does that objective actually serve the interests of the American people and our country? Does it serve our national security interests or not? And that's a huge area of distinction. I'm glad you brought it up. That requires courage and experience and understanding of national security and foreign policy in a commander-in-chief to be able to break through the foreign policy establishment that has been pushing this being the world's police foreign policy for so long. And I think that's what sets me apart from the vast majority of other candidates who are running for president, including Mayor Pete Buttigieg, is that I'm not gonna fall under the influence of the neocon or neolib foreign policy establishment in Washington, because I'm bringing the experience of having served in Congress for 7 years on the Foreign Affairs, Armed Services, Homeland Security committees, having a very deep understanding of our national security and foreign policy, that I'm prepared to walk in on day one to be the commander-in-chief of our armed forces.
I want to shift gears and go to the domestic economy. I am one of the few Republicans that believe that, one of the major political parties has an issue with income inequality.
Yes.
I am for capitalism. I am for the free market, but I along with Trump, believe the game is rigged. Yeah. We've stacked the deck in favor of certain subsets of individuals at the expense of others. If you are elected president, what is the answer? I mean, obviously, it's far more complicated than you'll have an opportunity to explain here, but the Cliff Note version, if you will, what is the government's role? What is the government's role in response to so few getting so much and so many getting so little?
And look, this really just comes down to fairness in our system. So we have our tax code, for example. We see how burdensome it is for our small business owners who are struggling just to keep the doors open and the lights on. They are paying their taxes. They're dealing with healthcare costs. They're trying to take care of their employees and keep their business open as a critical part of our community. Small businesses continue to be the backbone of our economy. Yet when you look at things like our tax policy, it so disproportionately favors the largest of corporations, multinational corporations who are making bank. They're making a tremendous amount of profits. They have these tax loopholes and things that they can exploit to the point where they are paying zero taxes, while the everyday small business owner in communities across this country is struggling just to be able to make ends meet and keep their doors open. I think this is one of the clearest examples of this inequality and this unfair system that we have. I think it goes to the heart of what happens when you have a powerful elite that's in control in Washington, and we the people get left behind, having no voice as these laws are being written. And this is at the heart of what needs to change.
Whether Trump is a fit and a rage or a brush fire, or we are in a fundamental reset in American politics, the reality is the president's court appointees have enormous sway and influence in the Supreme Court. I think it drives the liberal wing of your party crazy when Trump, gets the opportunity to appoint a Supreme Court justice. If you are once again elected president, what sort of justice will you look for to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court?
I think the most important quality is in a nominee to serve on the Supreme Court is someone who will uphold our Constitution. Someone who will uphold our Constitution, not through a Democratic partisan lens or a Republican partisan lens, but someone who understands the importance of making their decisions based on this bedrock, this foundation that we find within our Constitution. The problem with, and there's conversations, some people are saying, well, we should expand the numbers of Supreme Court justices as a way to kind of fix the problem. But the problem really is bigger than that. It is the partisan nature of actually the whole process of who is nominated and the process that goes through in our Senate. Both with Trump and previously with Obama, going through the charade of having nomination hearings and all these meetings was a waste of time, really, because the outcome is predetermined, right? Democrats are going to vote for the Democratic nominee. Republicans will oppose. Republican nominee, Democrats will oppose. Republicans will support. Maybe there's one or two outliers in the Senate who are on the fence that could go one way or the other. But by and large, it has become such a partisan process where if you go back not that long ago, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is an example of somebody who was nominated by a Democratic president, and she was confirmed with like 94 or 96 votes. This is the kind of mindset that we need to get back to in our government as a whole, where both from the administration and the White House, as well as with our senators, that they're not thinking about, well, what's going to be the best thing for my party or the next election, but this is a hugely consequential decision, and we all need to be making these decisions based on what is in the best interest of our country and upholding the principles and freedoms enshrined in our Constitution.
Okay, last question. Appreciate your time. Impeachment. I can't let you get out of here without getting your opinion on impeachment. Most Trumpsters believe that it was better left unsaid than name Joe Biden. I think most people who voted for Trump would rather him have left that at the door. I think most people believe it appropriate to chastise, maybe even censure the president in some way, shape, or form. But a lot of people on the right in the Trump camp believe this was inevitable. This was going to happen because all things pointed to that after the surprise of 2016 happened. From your perspective as a member of Congress, how do you digest, sort, and dissect the information to make that final determination?
That's exactly what I'm doing right now. I don't serve on any of the jurisdiction committees that held the hearings, and have been a little busy on the campaign trail, so I haven't been glued to the television, but I'm going through all of the information that has come from this inquiry. Look, I, for years now, have been concerned and openly critical of those who, from my party, are pursuing impeachment purely because of partisan interests and because they remain very unhappy about the outcome of the election in 2016. I get the unhappiness about the outcome of the election. Look, I'm running for president to change that, to actually beat Donald Trump at the ballot box, where voters will be the ones to come forward and say, yes, we want to change, and we want to change to move our country in the right direction. There have been a couple of votes that have taken place on the House floor, resolutions. I think they've actually both been introduced by Congressman Al Green from Texas to try to impeach the president. Previously, I have voted against those because of those concerns about the precedents that it sets where if you've got partisan motivations behind impeachment just to try to undo the outcome of the last election because you're on the losing side of that, then what's to stop this from becoming the new norm, where instead of Congress actually doing the people's work every day, the losing party ends up trying to pursue impeachment and hold hearings and all of these other things because they're trying to punish the winning party or undo the really what the voters decide in the last election. So the partisan push behind impeachment, I think, has already had a very negative and divisive effect in an already highly divided country. I am not decided yet on what I'm going to do for the vote that's going to come up on Wednesday. I really am doing my due diligence and treating this situation of impeachment of a sitting president with the seriousness that it deserves.
This is much less specific, more philosophical, but I'm sitting here listening to your answers, and they remind me of some of the answers I had when I ran for office. Has the duopoly failed America? Has the two-party system lost the credibility of the American public to effectively and efficiently govern? And if that's the case, are we on the precipice of an eventual third party?
I don't know the answer to that. As far as whether or not we are on the precipice of a complete change in the way we've done things for a long time, but I think the two-party system is failing voters in this country. Right? I meet people all the time who, have identified as Republican or Democrat their whole lives and then have left. Now they say, nope, I'm an independent. Both parties are working more for their own interests and building more power in Washington and centralizing that power and using it using it as a way to increase the hyperpartisanship rather than seeing themselves as representations of maybe different political ideologies and having real debates on the substance and seeing, okay, well, who has the better ideas? Which ideas can actually win the day? It's not what we have anymore. And I think it's the power that these parties have because of the campaign finance laws that basically say, if you wanted to write a $5 million check to the party of your choice, you can do that. Whereas if you wanted to make a contribution to my campaign, any individual, you're limited to $2,800. And so that has created an incredible imbalance between the power that's held in the hands of very few in the political elite in Washington versus the individual who is being elected by voters and whose sole focus should just be on serving voters. So I want to see great reform in our political system as a whole so that wherever we end up with a reality, a bringing to reality of the vision that Abraham Lincoln laid out for us, where our government is truly, in reality, in practice, every single day, a government that is of, by, and for the people.
I think that is very well said. There are people on your side of the aisle who freak me out about potentially becoming president. You're not one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I find it to be very thoughtful, very measured, and of the sort of temperament that we need in American politics.
Thank
I thank
you
you for your time.
I appreciate it. This is wonderful.
Absolutely. We'll take a break. Back in just a minute.